Welcome to From the Faculty Lounge. I'm Linda Bell, Provost and Dean of the Faculty, and on behalf of Barnard College, I'm pleased to welcome you to the second of this year's series of cross-disciplinary conversations that we hope bring the liberal arts to life. Tonight, we'll look at the effectiveness of games as an educational tool in the classroom. And we're joined by two people who should know quite a bit about games. First, Professor Mark Carnes, a professor of history, and Professor Stephanie Pfirman from environmental science, and also the Hirshhorn Professor of Environmental and Applied Science. Welcome, and thank you both for being here tonight.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks. Professor Carnes joined the history department in 1982. His academic specialty is modern American history. In 1995, Professor Carnes pioneered the Reacting to the Past initiative, which has now been implemented in over 300 colleges and universities in the US and abroad. He is the author of 11 books, including most recently, Minds on Fire, How Role Immersion Games Transform the College. Professor Pfirman joined the faculty in 1993 and serves as the co-chair of the Department of Environmental Science. She holds a joint appointment with Columbia University, where she's a member of the faculties of the Earth Institute and the Department of Earth and Environmental Sciences, and also an adjunct research scientist at the Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory of Columbia University. She helped to co-develop the Echo Chains Arctic Circle Crisis card game, which she's here today to share with us. Although their work is in different areas and very different scholarly foci, they clearly both have demonstrated an interest in games as an educational tool. And so we intend to use tonight to, quite frankly, have some fun. So let me begin with you, Mark, if I may. The skeptics among us would say that our classrooms are serious places for deeply engaged scholarship. And yet, in your classrooms, students play games. Do students learn in that environment? Do they learn more?
We'd probably all agree that the only way to learn is by working. But it doesn't follow that when we tell students to work, that they'll necessarily work. We say work harder. That doesn't mean they'll work harder. Conversely, we know that often when people are playing, they work very hard at it. For example, you've got basketball players who will practice foul shots for hours and hours and hours, just mindless tedium, which looks like work. But they'll do it intensely. What I found is that you can often motivate people to work harder by playing. A game can be a motivational device that can trick you into working. And so that's sort of the concept.
You conceived of the idea over 2 decades ago. So
That's just not true.
It isn't?
I was trying to jazz up a class that had left me and my students bored. I had no idea that we'd be creating eventually these large intellectual structures that would be thickly gamed in some elements. I had no idea. I had no desire. But it has been one of the most exciting and stimulating parts of my intellectual life, certainly.
Have you seen measurable impacts in a positive direction in your own experience and in the experience of others?
The range of assessments is one way of looking at that, and there have been a whole bunch of studies of reacting, but the main thing is that students become so motivated, they get wrapped up in the games, and that they need my advice, my guidance, not to get a good grade, but to solve some problem, to sort out some issue that has consumed them. And that is teaching of the most wonderful character, a student who's fully motivated, who is completely immersed in their work.
Professor Pfirman, can you tell us a little bit about your background, how you became interested in the Arctic and climate change, and then how you, sort of the concept behind developing this card game?
So I first went up to the Arctic in 1980. So it was a really long time ago. And back then, we weren't talking so much about climate change. We were concerned about other issues. In 2007, Arctic sea ice had been declining. And suddenly, 2007, I looked at the charts, and I was like, it's going. I couldn't believe how fast it was going. We lost 25%, almost 25% of the ice cover. And so at that point, I said, we can't just be studying this. We need to do something about it. And we need to do something that will really bring the Arctic home to people, such that they understand what's happening, what the implications are for themselves, and also for the Arctic as well.
How has this game disseminated, and who are the audience?
Right, so we're working on that part of it right now. The idea is to create novel educational approaches to reach adults, and adults including teachers. Only 1 in 5 Americans are in school. So you think of those other 4 out of 5, how are they getting information about climate change? They didn't have it when they went to school. So how are they going to learn about it? And so we have to use informal educational approaches, such as games. My co-developer is Joey Lee from Teachers College, and he's a games professor. And we wanted to look at the impact, and we realized that there are hardly any controlled studies out there that really do look at the impact of a game versus another approach. We tuned an article to have the same content as the game. We then ran focus groups, or we brought people in literally off the street in Boston, and we said, we had them play the game or read the article. We had surveyed them ahead of time about what they knew about the Arctic. We surveyed them afterwards, and then we did a 4-week follow-up. And what we found was at the immediate survey, there was no difference between the ones who read the article and the ones who played the game. So for that, that was a victory already, right? But then the really cool thing was 4 weeks later, the ones who played the game remembered more. So the learning was stickier. It was more memorable because it was in a game format.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Can you run us through an example of a game situation in the classroom, how it's structured, how it works?
Well, we see that reacting consists of complex games set in the past where students take on roles informed by classic text. The idea is that a reacting game lasts anywhere from 3 weeks to 5 weeks. The key thing about reacting as opposed to other classrooms is that the students run the class. So the game structure basically creates the intellectual context that then the students inhabit. In inhabiting this structure, and a reacting game will consist of anywhere from 250,000 to 750,000 pages of materials. The students, in going through that, learn the material, but they also learn a lot of other things as well. We have now 15 published games ranging from just history, classics, religion, political science, art history, history of science, communications, and so a whole bunch of different fields.
Stephanie, the Echo Chains game, what's its next phase?
One of the fun things has been creating other versions. So we have an EcoChains Antarctica version. We could do an EcoChains, say, coral reefs, because there's so many changes that are happening with the coral reefs there. And so that's the area that I'm working on right now and that I'm excited about, is potentially partnering with businesses on this.
Is there a venue for adoption in classrooms?
Yes. The way I use this in my first year seminar is I have the students play the game and also some other games that we've developed. And then their end of semester project is that they have to come up with a proposal for a novel educational approach to communicate to their peers about climate change or the Arctic. And they pitch it to their peers, and we have a workshop where we give them advice on how to make it better. And to see them getting their arms around it and actually creating something themselves is really exciting. In the workshop format where we have the students pitch their best ideas, and I tell them, look, I don't grade on a curve. You know, give away your best ideas to your colleagues in the class, because the better you can make the project, the better it will be. So.
We found that once a faculty member starts doing reacting at a faculty workshop where they learn how to teach reacting by playing a reacting game, quickly they are thinking of their own game. So one of the things that's developed with reacting is this, we call the Reacting Consortium is the governing body of this organization. It created an editorial board. Mm-hmm. And it supervises the development of games, and there are now 120 games in development. And there's this whole process involving students and faculty, and they work together and basically see what works and what doesn't. And I'm sure that's exactly the trial and error method that you probably use too.
Mark, the title of your book is Minds on Fire. A lot of what I've heard you say and seen you write is about the transformative aspect of the games that these students play in the classroom. And one particular thing you've spoken about is the possibility that these games make our students more empathetic. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Several students took over a discussion class and began to invest it with some richness that I hadn't imagined, but I also gave them control of the class, which caused things to unfold in a way that pushed the students out of themselves and into these roles in a powerful way. Reacting takes them out of it, puts them in the shoes of someone else, but also into mindsets of other people. And this is where I think imagination goes, but also empathy. By living in the minds of someone else for a semester, I think that is one of the significant payoffs of a reacting experience.
And Stephanie, you talked a little bit about retention and the game helping retention. Does it have other impacts?
This particular game, the main sort of aha moment is when we have some sea ice and it's supporting a food web, and they have to, carbon pollution, they draw a carbon pollution card and they have to melt the ice. So the game mechanic is you turn the ice over, it turns into water, and the food web that they've been constructing, and they're stewards of this marginal sea, it collapses. They have to figure out what species are particularly ice associated. They can migrate if they can find more ice to another player, but often that's not the case. And so then they're out of the game. And you just hear when people turn this over and they have that realization, they all go, oh, right? Yeah. And so they get that real sense that something that previously was invisible to them is now visible and really has come home to them. But we have another role-playing game actually called Arctic Smartic, Strategic Management of Resources in Times of Change. So it sounds better than the long version. In that case, we assign students or whoever's playing it, we assign them the roles, because that supposedly opens up more of a sense of empathy for the role, and they're not so much advocating as they are trying to understand each other. So that's been really interesting to see, and it's worked out really well in a wide variety of settings.
Thinking about the games and the interaction with students, can you share what you've learned through this process?
I'm just amazed at when I've used this as a model in a class, and then I've asked students, how would you go about communicating to your peers about these subjects? I've just been amazed at the ingenuity, the creativity of the students. They come up with these incredible ideas, and they research them, they're so committed to them. What our students can do is really incredible.
The main skill and the hardest thing for me was to simply surrender a space that I was accustomed to dominating. And what I found is that when I gave that space up to the students, they did things I couldn't imagine students can do.
Another thing that surprised me is working with adults on climate change. The polls show that people are so divided and so polarized. But in every time I go to a venue, people are just so curious. They have all these questions and they want answers, and they're so excited to be talking to somebody about it. There's more of a hunger for information out there than people recognize right now.
Do you see it proliferating in any way?
I do. For example, when you went into a grocery store, what if you could do the eco opt-in, right? And instead of just getting the prices of everything, you could get the food shed, the water shed, the energy shed, right? Of what the impact is. You would make much better, more informed choices. The information is out there now, and if we can pull it together in these ways, that we can help people make decisions at the time that they're actually making them, I think that's just really exciting. And in a game-like way, so that it's fun. Maybe when you go through the cash register and you have a good watershed, cart, the bells go off, or you get a coupon or something like that, right? It would be fun, and it would also change behavior as well.
And Stephanie, you've mentored many students in all kinds of capacities. You helped to really create the environmental science program at Barnard to great acclaim. Do you see through sort of the hands-on approach in your research labs and in working directly with students, does that create the kind of impact that we so desperately need in terms of thinking about the climate and the future?
Because climate change is colorless, odorless gases, right? How do you teach about it? So I think the more ways that we can make the invisible visible and make it tangible and have people interact with it, the better.
I'd like to know from both of you, what do you most want people to take away from your contributions in research?
The actions that we can take will actually make for a stronger America as well as the rest of the world. It's a really hopeful message. I sometimes talk about it as if, when you get a bad medical diagnosis, what do? Well, you start eating better, so you deal with your consumption. You start interacting with other people who have a similar one. So that's like communicating about this and working in groups. You get more exercise, so that's changing our transportation patterns. So, you think of all those different elements when you deal with yourself. And I think that maybe this is something that could actually bring our country together and the world together when we try to address these issues in a forward-looking way.
That's very inspirational, and it brings home the importance of getting people to know the facts.
That's right, exactly.
What I think reacting has going for it are the elements of fun, which I define as competition, make-believe, that is to take on new identities and roles, and thirdly, to incorporate subversive elements, ideas or positions or perspectives that repudiate the dominant structures, beliefs, practices of a culture or society. And so part of what is fun for students is not just that they're competing, that they're taking on identities, but they're also reversing the dynamics of the classroom. They are mighty emperors, they are important leaders, they are key figures while the instructor is the game master. But also then adopting perspectives and values that subvert the normal order are delicious, and they've got an edge to them that make things fun. That is, I think, my scholarly contribution, which is trying to come up with a definition of fun which theorists say cannot be defined.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and thank all of you for being here.